발동계 내공기지 콘크리트보다는 파도치는 그런 비가 좋아요. 해질녘 노을의 강장길 우리 같이 걸어봐요. 정말로 그대가
Thank you, Andrew. I think I'll try to talk for at the most 30 minutes, and then I think there'll be plenty of time for question and answer. It's great to be here with all of you. Thank you very much for coming. The Global Network, this is our website up here. Dave is also the convener of our board of directors of the Global Network, and he's also the webmaster, so he's responsible for our website. This is just a scroll down a bit on our home page where this summer, every year we have an annual meeting in a different country, and so we were invited to go to Japan, to Kyoto, Japan, where we had our 23rd annual meeting at the end of July, beginning of August, and people took us to, in Kyoto Prefecture, they took us to a village called Yukawa Village, where the U.S. is set up a fairly new base that is a base for missile defense, and I'll explain missile defense a little later. But so we went and stood with the people of the village, and that picture right there, oh, you just missed it. Keep your eyes on it. You see a big bunch of people together, not that one, but one a little later. That's us in Yukawa Village. But prior to going there, Dave and some of the other people in that picture right there went to Okinawa, where another base and another fight is going on right now in Okinawa. So anyway, this is kind of our report about our summer. And after we were finished in Japan, I went on to Gangjeong Village on Jeju Island for about 12 days. My fourth time to go there over the years. So I was very happy to go there this summer. And mainly I wanted to sit at the front gate where the cement trucks daily come in and out. I wanted to be there and sit there to help block the gate with the many Catholic priests and nuns that are there on a daily basis, as well as other supporters from the mainland and other places. So, and then, do you see those airplanes that were just there in the sky? Keep looking, and there'll be some airplanes that'll pop up. On my very last day, I was just getting ready to get into the car to take me to the Jeju City Airport, and these airplanes from the Korean, right there, Korean Air Force flew over the village very low, basically just above the roofs. Wow. And if you've never experienced anything like that, it's unbelievable. Would you two mind coming and sitting around the table? That way I can see you and look at you. So anyway, it was a pretty amazing experience. But before they took me to the airport, actually, I was taken to a Jeju City radio station for an interview. I was told it's the most listened to radio station on the island. And we were going to talk about my experience being in Gangjeong Village for those 12 days. And as my interpreter, a friend, and one of our board members, Sung-hee Che, who's also in one of these pictures, she's got a microphone in her hand on the left side, and then I'm going to pop up too. She was my interpreter on the radio show, and we were sitting there waiting. That's her right there. We were waiting to go on the air, and we were listening to she was listening to the news reports on the radio. And one of the reports was that Samsung, who is the lead contractor for the base construction, was asking the ROK government to charge the village with $30 million in damages, make them pay $30 million in damages for their years. Now it's about 8 years of daily blocking the construction vehicles going into the base. So there have been delays. And so Samsung wants the village to pay for those delays. And I've since learned that Daelim Corporation, one of the other contractors, is also asking for $20 million in fines or delay, costs. And they're asking all of this from the village, $50 million, of a village of just under 2,000 people. A fishing and farming community. Where in the world are they going to get $50 million? And Sung-hee told me later that when the village leaders heard this report, their response was, my God, they're trying to kill the village. They don't just want to take part of it for this Navy base, which is growing all the time now as they're building housing for the military families and the Navy personnel and everything else. They just keep taking more and more land. But now it's very clear that they want to take the entire village ultimately and destroy it. So that was a crowning experience for me, a crowning moment on my last day there on this last trip. But let me go back now and talk about the global network and just a little bit about myself. I grew up in a military family. My father was a career Air Force man, and we moved around from base to base as I was growing up. And then in 1971, I tried to join the Air Force. I wanted to be like my father, a career military man. And I flunked my induction physical to get into the military. I flunked the physical. So I had to get a waiver to get into the military. It was just an old high school football injury that I had. But during this time, most people were trying not to go in the military because of the war in Vietnam. And so anyway, I went in and I was stationed at a base in California that was an airlift base for the war in Vietnam. So soldiers would come to our base, get on the planes, fly to Vietnam, and when the planes would come back, they would bring the body bags of the dead soldiers. And so there was a lot of anti-war activity outside the base, outside the gate, protests on the weekends, usually quite small. But the people on the base, the military personnel on the base, would talk about those protesters. It created what I call sparks, little sparks flying in the air as a result of these protests, and it changed my life. And that's where I became a peace activist. So after about 6 months of being in the military, I decided I completely changed, because I was a real right-wing, conservative, militarist when I went in. And I changed completely and decided I wanted to get out. I asked to be released as a conscientious objector, but they turned me down. So I was in for 3.5 years, what I called a hard time, because it was very hard for me to be there after I figured out what was really going on in Vietnam. So I've been a peace activist ever since, and an organizer ever since. And I went to college for a while after I got out of the Air Force, but in 1978 I became a union organizer, organizing poor farm workers, extremely poor farm workers in the state of Florida, Mexican immigrants, poor black people, and Jamaicans who were picking fruit, oranges, around Florida. And so I did that for several years and have been an organizer ever since 1978. And so in around 1983, I started working on space issues directly, space issues, because at that time I lived in the state of Florida, which is where the US space program, NASA, the Cape Canaveral, where they launched the rockets, and the space shuttle used to be launched from Cape Canaveral. So I lived very close to there, and so I began paying attention to what was happening with the space program. So I began to specialize on space. And but then in 2003, I moved the opposite direction, all the way north. Florida is in the south, very tropical climate there. And so I moved all the way to the north, the other end of the country, to the state of Maine on the east coast, the Atlantic Ocean, but at the very top near the Canadian border. I tend to like cold weather more than the hot weather, so so I moved to Maine, and I live in a town called Bath, and they have a shipbuilding facility in Bath, Bath Iron Works, where they build destroyers for the Navy. And these destroyers, as it turns out, I learned one day because of our board member, Sung-hee Che, she told me that, you know, these destroyers are going to go to Gangjeong village on Jeju Island. This was some years ago, probably, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago or so. And I'd never heard of this place before. I'd of course heard of Korea, but I'd never heard of Jeju Island, never heard of Gangjeong village. And so, as it turned out, on this one occasion, she told me that there was going to be a protest on Jeju on this particular day, and I said, well, you know, that's interesting because on this same day they're having another christening where they do the blessing of Christ of a new warship, you know, and so we always organize a protest there when they do that. And so I said, you know, on this very same day, we're going to be protesting another warship, and so that was the first time that I ever publicly talked about Jeju Island. I talked about it as a place where these ships would go from our community when they would go to Korea in the future. So that's how we got started in the global network, working on the issue of Jeju Island. And so we were invited to hold one meeting in Seoul, or annual meeting, probably around 2010 or 2009. And then I did a couple speaking tours around the country, and I was taken to Jeju on 2 different occasions on those speaking tours. But then the village leaders asked us to come and have our annual meeting in Gangjeong village in 2012. And so we did. Dave came, and a bunch of our people came from around the world, from different countries. And on the second to last day that we were there, by this time, Gurumbi Rock, the sacred rocky coast, was sealed off with razor wire, this kind of circular, really sharp wire along the coastline. And we were taken out on kayaks, good, probably, I don't know, around 30 of us, I think, or something like that. We went out there, and Father Moon, the Catholic priest, who's been in Jeju now for quite a long time, he led a prayer service on Gurumbi Rock, and then 16 of us, including Dave and myself and 14 other people, crawled under the razor wire and were arrested on that day. And we were taken to 2 different jails and processed. And anyway, so the next day we left. They let us go, and we left the next day to come home. So I literally, I would say on a daily basis for the last 6 years, I go to the various Facebook pages of the campaign to stop the Navy base, and I watch the videos, I look at the pictures, I read the reports. So the struggle in Gangjeong village has been close to my heart for a long time. And I really see it as a kind of multi-dimensional struggle that makes me so touched by it. First of all, is the whole issue of the peace issue, of course. Here the island of peace is being militarized. And why? What's the reason? Well, of course, it's this part of this U.S. pivot into the Asia Pacific, where the United States will move 60% of U.S. military forces into the Asia Pacific in order to surround and control China in the coming years. U.S. feels challenged by China. And so when you do that, when you move 60% of U.S. forces into the region, guess what? You need more barracks for your soldiers. So in places like Darwin, Australia, they're building a new barracks for U.S. Marines that are going to be deployed there. In Okinawa, where Dave went on this, and these people right there are in these pictures, that's Okinawa. They, out in Ora Bay, they're building this new base Marine airfield because they need more airfields for U.S. warplanes. And this airfield is going to extend out into the bay where coral reefs are and endangered mammals live. And they're now building these, I guess you'd call them cement pilings out there in the bay that will hold the runways as the runway is extended out into the bay. And so people there have been really organizing strongly against this for some time. And then they need more ports of call for the U.S. Navy warships. And so places like Jeju Island are important. After I first started trying to do support work for the village, one day I sent an email out to our list in the United States asking our friends across the country to call the South Korean embassy in Washington and say, please stop building this base. And so I called, and the woman that received the phone call said, don't call us, call your government, they're forcing us to build this base. And then I started getting phone calls from some of my friends and emails from some of my friends that were telling me they were hearing the same thing. Because officially, the line is, the United States says, oh, well, we're not building this base, the South Korean government's building this base. And yes, under the status of forces agreement that the U.S. has with the South Korean government, we'll be able to use the base, but we don't really have anything to do with it. But that's all a lie. In fact, we now know that the specifications for the base were given by the U.S. Navy to the Korean government. This is what we want because they want to put their aircraft carriers there, their nuclear submarines, and their Aegis destroyers made in my hometown of Bath, Maine. So it's quite clear what the real agenda is here. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous for the villagers, it's dangerous for people on Jeju Island, and it's dangerous for the people of South Korea. Because what this means is that the South Korean government has become a vassal, an appendage, a tool of the U.S. military, of the U.S. government's effort to try to control China. In fact, NATO, that has been expanding on steroids to encircle Russia, moving eastward right up to the Russian border, is now also moving into the Asia Pacific, and they've signed up Australia, New Zealand, Mongolia, Japan, and South Korea as NATO partners. And so NATO is becoming a global military alliance, trying to really, literally control the entire planet on behalf of corporate capitalism. So very dangerous, very provocative program underway here. I'm also concerned and deeply moved by the videos that I've seen of the soft coral forests just off Gangjeong village. I didn't know this for a while. I didn't know there was any difference between coral, but there's sort of a hard coral reefs, but then there are these soft coral forests that literally move and dance in the water, and they're so spectacularly beautiful. If you haven't seen them, I urge you to Google them on YouTube because they're just incredibly beautiful. And we now know that as the South Korean government is dredging the entryway into the port that is being constructed there now, into the village, that as they stir up the ocean floor, they are literally beginning to kill the soft coral reefs that are recognized by the UN agency UNESCO, that are endangered species, and as well as the 100, I forgot what they're called, the dolphins, the particular type of dolphins that live off. Bottlenose,
yeah.
That's right. And they're endangered as well, I believe. There's only 100 of the bottlenose dolphins left, and they pass right through this area and are often seen by villagers. And then the red crabs and other endangered species that lived on Gurumbi Rock amongst the vegetation and other life that existed there. So Gangjeong village is a peace issue for me. It's an environmental issue for me. and ultimately a human rights issue. As we see the way the village people have been treated, the way the government went about creating the whole pretext to say that they had the village's permission to build the base, when they had a hearing that they didn't advertise, a town meeting that they didn't advertise, and they just brought a few people there and paid off some people huge amounts of money to say, yes, we support the village. But then once the people in the village really learned what the government had done, they literally almost the entire village turned out and they voted, I believe it was 95% to oppose the village. But the government said, oh no, that vote doesn't count because we've already got the okay from the people. So the entire treatment of the people in Gangjeong village has just been absolutely inappropriate, unfair, undemocratic. I mean, every word you can think to describe it, it's just been terrible, and it makes me furious.
They also said that it was going to be a place where cruise ships could go. Because when we were there, they had a picture of the harbour, what the harbour would be like with cruise ships, but holiday tourists bringing in lots of trade. But of course now they admit now that it's a military base. Sorry, just another thing, because this is quite indicative of how the people are treated in these places. And in Okinawa, when we were there, the base that Bruce has mentioned, that came about because people of Okinawa protested for years about the military presence on their island, for many, many years, very strongly. And at last they thought they got somewhere. They had an agreement with the US that the US would close one of the bases on Okinawa. And that was because they had to. It was too small. There were too many buildings around it, and the planes really couldn't land and take off legally, really. So, okay, they thought that's great, they would close it. But actually what they did was they wanted to move it. They wanted to move the base, not from where it was at the moment, or where it is now, to this bay that Bruce has mentioned. And they've extended this existing base, a smaller existing base, into the bay. Again, the villagers, the people of Okinawa protested extremely strongly. In the end, they got a governor to agree to stop the progress of the building of the construction of the base, but now that's been overruled by the government. So whatever steps they take seem to be overruled by greater powers.
So over the years then, our organization, the Global Network, has done everything we could to build international support for the people on Jeju Island and Gangjeong Village, and we're very proud of that effort. We wish we could have done more. We wish we, you know how it is, but you do everything that you can. And then one of our friends, Regis Tremley, actually, he lives just across the river from where I live. I began raising money to try to send more people to go to the village, and Regis went and he came back and he made the film Ghosts of Jeju that won an award at the Chicago Peace on Earth Film Festival, the Best Documentary Award, actually, a couple of years ago. So I understand you're going to be showing this film.
Yeah, we're going to show it on Monday.
On Monday. So I urge people to see it. It's a good film. So anyway, I also want to ask Dave if he would talk about the award that he helped the village just get. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, every year, IPB, if you've heard of the IPB, International Peace Bureau, who've been around for a long time. They won the Nobel Peace Prize a long time ago. So they have been around for quite a while. Every year they award a prize, a peace prize, to somebody or some people who have done something pretty remarkable in terms of peace, to try and make a more peaceful world. And this year I proposed to them that they should award give the award to Gangjeong village, and it didn't take very much convincing that this was a good idea. Everybody had heard of Gangjeong village, so they knew about the struggle, and they were totally for it. And in fact, what they did was they awarded it to two people, the Gangjeong villagers, and also to the people of Lampedusa, the island in Italy, where they've accepted refugees and helped welcome refugees from North Africa. So the two island communities, and the links were really anti-militarism, or the anti-militarism, the construction of the naval base on Jeju Island, and then the results of more militarism, which is more refugees, and how do we deal with that kind of situation. So I think it worked really well, drawing out those two aspects of militarization. And the head, what is his role, who came to collect the award, I think he's
Mr.
Chief-
Go, he's the vice chair.
Vice
Vice
chair of the village.
village.
Yeah.
He came. I think he was really pleased. I think things have been very depressing in the village because of the construction that's going on, nearly completed now, and I think it was really good injection of some kind of at least recognition of their struggle and what had been going on there. So I was really pleased that went ahead, and at least gave them some kind of idea that there are other people in the world who know what they're doing.
Thanks, David. I want to just talk about two more things. One is, I said earlier, I would say something more about missile defense. These Navy destroyers that are made in my hometown of Bath, Maine, are outfitted with missile defense interceptors. They put them on the ships, okay? And they're being used today to encircle both Russia and China. So I want to explain what missile defense is, why it's so provocative, and why the U.S. is sending them now, wants to send them to Jeju Island. Missile defense, the idea is that you can attack another country first, try to destroy their nuclear weapons in a first strike attack, and win a nuclear war. That's an idea that the Pentagon, the United States military, craziest idea that you could ever imagine, but they've adopted that idea as official policy. And every year, the U.S. Space Command, the command in charge of space, all warfare on the planet today is directed and coordinated by space technology. Satellites and ground stations that talk to the satellites, relay information. Up in Yorkshire, where Dave lives, there are two of these ground stations that are part of this whole missile defense warfighting strategy. They're up there. One is called Menwith Hill, another Filingdales. U.S. has these all over the world. When we went to Yukawa Village in Japan, there's this picture will come up in a minute with a big bunch of people in it. That's the radar has been deployed in Yukawa Village for missile defense. And also missile defense, you see these banners is being put, that's the one, Yukawa Village. That's the radar station in that green building there. And so the U.S. is putting these places, these radars and downlink stations all over the planet for this system that talks to satellites and relays it and guides missiles to their targets. So missile defense, the idea is to hit them first. A sword lunges into the heart of Russia or China, first strike attack, try to destroy their nuclear weapons in that first strike. And then when they fire their remaining nuclear missiles, their retaliatory capability, missile defense is the shield that would be used to pick off their retaliatory strike. So after the first strike sword goes in, they try to fire their retaliatory strike, missile defense picks it off. This used to be illegal under treaty between the United States and the former Soviet Union. After the former Soviet Union collapsed, Russia continued on with the treaty. It was called the ABM Treaty, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. It was provocative, destabilizing to have any side to have these missile defense systems. So a treaty was in place saying nobody will have them. Good idea. Then George W. Bush became president of the United States. He walked away from the treaty, pulled the United States out of the treaty, and Obama has been escalating the deployment of missile defense systems now surrounding Russia and China. And so on ships, these systems are, and they're going to go to a place like Jeju Island, which makes Jeju Island a prime target for both Russia and China in the region. Russia borders Korea, China borders Korea, and so as the United States puts more of these systems into Korea, Korea becomes even more a target than ever before. Very destabilizing, very crazy, and it creates a whole new level of an arms race, whole new dangers for world peace. So this is very bad. So how do we really reach people? How do we organize people, especially in my country that is the aggressor in so many of these situations? The U.S. has 800 bases around the world. Russia has one military base outside of its own borders. China is just now, you might have heard, building some Navy places along some little islands in the waterway where they import 80% of their oil on ships. 80% of the resources that China uses to fuel their economy brought in on ships. So as the United States pivots 60% of its military into the region, developing the ability to choke off China's importation of resources on ships, China's getting worried. So they're building a few of these Navy bases in the region in order to essentially defend their shipping lanes near their ocean, near their land borders. So, but the U.S. 800 bases around the world. It's not even close, not a close comparison at all. So anyway, how do we in the United States, peace activists like me, how do we get the American people to understand what's happening? Our media is controlled by corporations. They don't want to report any of these stories to the American people anymore. Famous linguist, Professor Noam Chomsky, you might have heard of him from MIT, Massachusetts Institute for Technology, one of the leading universities in the United States. He says, how do you expect the American people to react to any of this when they don't know anything about it because it's not reported in the media? And so this year, just last month in October, I got with a bunch of my friends. I'm a member of Veterans for Peace. It's a national organization in the United States. We have a chapter in my state in Maine. And so I said, let's organize a peace walk and let's focus on the Navy, because we have Bath Iron Works in our state. We can talk about where these ships go. We can talk about Jeju Island, the impact. And we can also talk about the Navy's impact on the environment, because as it turns out, the United States military is the biggest contributor to climate change on the planet. The biggest polluter on the planet is the U.S. military, and the Navy is a significant part of that whole process. On the back of we made this shirt for a peace walk that we organized, 2.5 week peace walk down the coastline of Maine. And one of our friends, an artist, made this drawing of the Navy's sonar impact on dolphins and whales. It kills them. It essentially bursts their brains. This is why, one of the reasons why there's so many beachings of sea mammals where you see they're essentially committing suicide. They wash themselves up onto the shore, and oftentimes they're bleeding, their brains are bleeding. It's because they've been impacted by sonar. So we wanted to talk about all these issues and bring them directly to people in our state, because we can get around this corporate domination of the media. We can find a way to go around it by walking. We had a long line of people with very colorful signs and banners, and one of the same artist who made this picture on the back of my sweatshirt, he created this beautiful dolphin, and we put it on top of a van, and he made this unbelievable, beautiful poster. Do you think you could find a copy of it on Facebook or something that we could show? I think people should see it. So anyway, we had this van that was always in front of us as we walked down the coast, and so many people saw this, and we handed out flyers to people, and we got interviews in local newspapers as we walked down the coast. And we reached tens of thousands of people in our state. Maine is a very large state, very rural state, and we only have 1.3 million citizens in the entire state. So it doesn't take a lot of people before you can affect the consciousness of the people of the state. So by walking down the entire coast of the state of Maine, we were able to go up a little and show well, can you click on that one? No, you can't. But anyway, this is, let me just walk over there and show you. We started the walk up here in Ellsworth, Maine, and came down. This is Highway 1, right along the coastline, all the way down. This is the border between Maine and the state of New Hampshire. And then there's a nuclear submarine base right here. And where I live in Bath, up here, there's the Bath Iron Works. So we had protests at Bath Iron Works, and we had protests at the Navy submarine base on the last day of the walk. So it took us 2.5 weeks to come down. And here's a picture of one of the bleeding dolphins. You can see how they've been affected. This is a walk we did last year. Go ahead, Dave. If you keep going down, you'll come to paradise. So this artist made this depiction of the sea life and demilitarize our oceans, and this was the dolphin. Actually, he made this dolphin in 1979 for a walk he did across the entire country with Greenpeace, and he had it on a cart, and he pulled this cart all the way across the United States. So this artist, he's a wonderful human being. He becomes very emotional about his love for whales and dolphins in particular. And so he redesigned the whole structure of the dolphins so it would fit on top of that van. And so a lot of people saw that as we came down the coast. So we're trying to be more creative to find ways to be able to reach people, to have them understand what our country is doing, not only to places like Jeju Island, but also to the sea life and how we impact the sea life as well. So let me stop there, and let's just open it up and have a discussion if any questions or comments or feelings you might have or anything else like that. So thank you all very much for listening.